Welcome back to Buying Sandlot. I'm Kyle Pagan, and as always, I'm joined by Kyle Scott. On today's episode, we're talking about a new report that offers an inside look at how many clubs use live streaming, a little bit on cost, and a little bit on travel, revealing new numbers as well. More naming rights deals, of course, a new HUDL campaign that could change a club forever, and the Patriot Games. They are actually happening this weekend.
James' favorite topic.
I know he wasn't so bullish on the Patriot Games, but I'm sure we'll have a great expose on Monday or sometime next week when they air it on the ESPN app this week. Before we do get into the episode, we want to thank our partners at Black Magic Design for sponsoring the show. Recently, every kick, phase, scrum, and try at this year's Tropical Sevens Youth Rugby Tournament was streamed thanks to Black Magic Design. That included their A10 Mini Extreme and Mini Pro switchers and converters for multi-camera streaming and their DaVinci Resolve replay and post-production solutions. Included was 250 teams and 750 plus matches across 15 fields over 4 days of frenetic action, streamed live in its entirety at a level not previously seen in the sport. You know it. I know it. Kyle knows it. Everyone who watches youth sports, athletes, parents, and grandparents, coaches, college recruiters has come to expect streaming that looks and sounds professional. And you could find more information at Black Magic Design and their suite of affordable products using the same high quality as those used by professional sports teams and in Hollywood.
Did you catch the one of the other sports business report substacks out there that shall go, the sports business report substack that shall go unnamed, that took the copy from that ad you just read, which also sponsored a sports video group site. And then their AI ran it as a hard news story, not realizing that it was an advertisement both on Buying Sandlot and the SVG, which is a sports, I think it's Sports Video Group, SVG stands for. So they took the ad copy and their AI mistook it for a news story. So I enjoyed that.
Interesting. I think that did come across my desk.
I mean, it is. Listen, we love Black Magic Design, and it is a worthy story. But the Tropical Sevens event, I believe, was 4 months ago. So
yes, we on our end might have to update the copy. We might have to talk to the guys over at Black Magic Design. I don't know the podcast listeners if they're tired of hearing the same ad. But you know what? That's the thing about ads. You just beat people over the head with it until it's like, all right, fine, let me check out this Black Magic Design. I'll do it.
Frequency works, right? We tell all of our advertisers, like, hey, like the first time you run in our newsletter on the podcast, like you're not, especially for something that's a high ticket item or a long-term B2B business, you're not going to get like a client with a single newsletter ad. It happens over months, right? And then next thing you know, executives at large youth sports operators, the largest that are in our audience, are going to have that need, and they're going to say, I see this thing every week. I see Event Connect every week. I see Black Magic Design. I see Go4. I see Anchored,
Yeah.
Anyway, I got two extra topics for you real quick off the top.
Go ahead.
On Monday, I think we talked about this naming rights idea, and we expanded upon it in the newsletter on Wednesday. And I drew a little sketch, right? Kind of
Yes.
proof of life, right? By hand drawing it. So I would encourage you to read Wednesday's newsletter. It's the Dick's Sporting Goods Gets Perfect Game naming rights newsletter. It's pretty good. What I think is pretty good take in there. I also posted on LinkedIn, and this got lots of interaction, including from a lot of the folks in the sponsorship and agency space. I think Diana Priority Partnerships, Mark from Base. There are a few others. I apologize if I'm missing some off the top of my head. I think general support, and I would say also a constructive conversation behind this. Some people flagged, hey, in some cases, it's not clear who owns the rights for those naming rights. I think Marty Fox from Project Play jumped in there and said that. And there were some other ideas around, how this can be difficult, but also how this can unlock, more sponsorship revenue. My point when it comes to naming rights is that it's higher impact than just putting an ad on the jersey or just putting an ad on a stream. And today, everyone, and us too, we talk about sponsorship subsidizing costs in youth sports. But right now, it's only averaging like $5, $10, $15, $20 per player, because even these big sponsorship deals include thousands of teams, right? So we need to think about ways where the impact can be large enough that it's worth $50 or $100 or $200 per family. And I think that's where it needs to be something like the team naming rights or the league naming rights. Otherwise, if you're just doling out everyone's, you know, breadcrumbs from a streaming sponsorship, any individual family may only get $5 worth of ad revenue. It's not really impacting costs. So anyway, interesting conversation. I don't know if you have anything to add. I got one more point.
Yeah, I mean, SPIRE Academy, you lead us right into there if you want to get into that, or do you want to go your point first?
Yeah, read the Spire news. Go ahead.
Yeah, SPIRE Academy, for anyone that didn't see, they ink a naming rights partnership right at the finish line, as the Patriots games, which we mentioned earlier, is in town this weekend. Venture HR will have naming rights to two of the most prominent venues on campus, the Venture HR Fieldhouse and the Venture HR Stadium. This is the same company Spire signed a 5-year, $6 million deal with for a jersey patch on the boys basketball team earlier in February. So now they'll have men's basketball team will be playing in the Venture HR on their chest, and they'll be playing in the Venture HR Fieldhouse with Venture HR branding all over the place and recouping that money in any way they can with the brand. And now Patriot Games will be playing in the Venture HR Fieldhouse and the Venture HR Stadium, and Donald Trump is expected to show up, giving them even more brand
in the
awareness.
Venture HR Fieldhouse.
In the Venture HR Fieldhouse. So
it's funny. This almost, I mean, I don't know if there's any additional economics here. It's unclear. That doesn't seem like that was the case, but someone correct us if we're wrong. But James had written initially that this deal for Venture HR with Spire was not just a branding play. This was a strict ROI play. And I think they were seeking 3x their spend. So if it was a $6 million spend you sent, James, who's really good at math, calculated that they would need to see $18 million in return. And this is off hundreds of parents who are in the school, and basically like, hey, these are well-heeled parents, and if we can get X number of clients, that will turn into $18 million. That's how Venture HR, I think, was initially evaluating the deal, like a strict ROI. And, for all the things I just said about sponsorship, especially, expensive, high ticket, long sales cycle B2B sponsorship, it's hard to measure any one thing as having direct ROI. It's kind of about branding, awareness, influence, and being top of mind when someone's making an HR outsourcing decision. So I'm wondering if maybe that focus has shifted, or the ROI wasn't there just from being on the jerseys. And for all the reasons we just talked about, well, the naming rights are now much more visible than just a patch on the jersey. So maybe that's sort of playing out in real time.
Yeah, Venture HR is going to have a lot of opportunity to have some good brand awareness, like we talked about with the Patriot Games, which we talked about with James earlier in the year. He predicts that Spire might get a football team. Maybe they'll slap a jersey patch on them as they're getting up and ready. They'll play in the Venture HR Stadium and all that and stuff. I know you have another Ohio team you want to talk about with quite a premium experience that's getting some brand awareness this week.
Yeah, before we get into today's topic, the first two here, just sort of recapping things we've already talked about. But a few weeks ago, we talked about how pro and I would extend that to college teams here will need to think more holistically about their IP and how that might influence investment into youth sports, right? We talked about it specifically about pro and college teams needing more sources of revenue. In college, you have this tailwind of more direct payments to players, so they need more revenue. And in the pro level, you have private equity ownership moving in. You have declining RSN fees. So pro teams need to think more about hospitality, tiered pricing. These are some things we've talked about in a few episodes. And we talked specifically about how they may be able to use their IP, their venues. We talked about this with the Rays to put on youth sports events or have other commercial youth sports tie-ins. Whereas today, most of that stuff is sort of done under the guise of charity. There's like real revenue opportunities there. One of the things we said is that as teams, this isn't directly used, but youth, but as teams think more about how to monetize every inch of their IP, don't be surprised if access becomes a big part of that. I know we talked at least offline about how college may even have more upside here because in pro sports, you have a CBA and there's certain access. You just can't dole out the fans without a players union agreeing to it. But in college, it's the total wild, wild west right now. And sure enough, Akron football going viral this week for their promotion, where one lucky season ticket holder, premium season ticket holder, will get the chance to be the offensive coordinator for the day for their first game of the year. He'll get an NFL draft style phone call with the coach. He'll get, I believe, a play call sheet. He'll get mic'd up on the sideline. He'll get to go in team meetings. And I believe he'll even get to help script the first drive of the season. Front Office Sports yesterday says Akron football has already sold out its suites after its viral play calling promotion for season ticket holders, right? So I think this is the first of many of these sort of in-depth access things you're going to see in pro and college sports. And I wouldn't be surprised if it moves from, yes, this is a contest to drive more season ticket sales, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see it move beyond contest to actually like a $25,000 thing one lucky fan can pay for every game to be part of the coach's table. So yeah, we said it, and here goes. It happens, and it's going to happen a lot. And then just the other day here in Philly, we had a guy who won a charity auction for the Phillies. I knew you're. Yeah, you say. I know.
Yeah, he won a charity auction for the Philadelphia Phillies. Got to call an inning on the broadcast and went
radio
viral.
Broadcast. Went viral, was good at it, and I think he paid like it was $22,000. It was part of the Phillies auction. So again, like I said, a lot of these access things, whether it's youth or just other ways, to get adults in the broadcast booth, have typically fallen under the guise of charity, which is great, and that's not going away. But as teams think more about revenue, don't be surprised if pro and college teams begin selling these things as a for-profit revenue line to call an inning of the game or sit with the coaches. And it's going to happen more and more in college. And I think this will trickle down to youth teams, right? Your team can pay X number of dollars to play on the field before the game. This happens in some spots, but again, it's usually community initiatives. But as private equity ownership, gets pieces of more teams, and you have teams needing more than just the media rights, which has been a tailwind for the last, several decades. Don't be surprised this stuff gets sold out. So anyway, that was a double click on two things we talked about. Let's get into today's stuff, I guess.
All right, let's get into the streaming report. Only 30% of youth sports organizations are currently streaming in a report published by Native Frame and Replayer, up from 22% in 2025 when the companies began producing the report. But about 2/3 of the organizations that do not currently stream are either actively planning or considering adoption. And here are some of the noteworthy numbers. About 75% of streamers are community or school-based. 90% of streamers are in markets where other orgs stream. 77% of streamers say it has met or exceeded expectation. 22% are fully automated. 45% have some form of automation. Only 2% of organizations are looking to streaming to generate new revenue streams, and 82% of streaming respondents use more than one streaming platform. The average respondent uses over 3. So all of the below figures come from multiple answer prompts. Kyle, any of those numbers stick out to you?
A few things stick out. So Native Frame and Replayer, we actually talked about Replayer recently in kind of the sponsorship equation. They went a little bit viral on LinkedIn in our sect a couple of weeks ago about how they were going to end pay to play in youth sports by sponsorship on the streams. And, we sort of questioned some of the math for all the reasons we laid out. Separate thing. So they did this report with Native Frame. A version of this report with slightly different questions and data points came out last year. It's worth noting, I kind of read their methodology here. It said 559 respondents, but it's worth calling out that 335 of those responses were from parents and 56 were from college athletes. I'm not sure why. I don't think college is typically classified under youth sports, right? There was only like 83, I would call youth sports operators in the methodology. So it would take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. That said, it matches other studies we've seen about streaming, and it matches some of our own first-party data. I would add ours. We surveyed 214 self-identified youth sports operators. 49% of them said they don't currently stream. So, roughly half. And then in terms of that half, 16% are using something other than the major platforms or a self-run platform, which is exactly what Replayer found. Game Changer is the biggest name platform. Then you have YouTube, HUDL, and Facebook with smaller amounts. So all of this data points to the same thing. And we've kind of seen this for the last year and a half, is that the adoption opportunity in streaming is significant. Parents especially seem to default to Facebook and YouTube. I think a lot of this is just education. They don't realize there are purpose-built platforms that do this better. Game Changer, again, has done the best job of this in baseball. It's kind of the standardized version. It's the Kleenex of streaming baseball games, right? But other sports, nobody has really taken the mantle in terms of being the go-to streamer in that sport that every parent just thinks of the way baseball dads think of Game Changer. So there's a lot of green space here for streaming cameras, streaming companies, the tech platforms. I like what TeamSnap and Xbox Go are doing because distribution is the biggest challenge. So TeamSnap has all these teams. You partner with a camera company. It's a good way to get some instant scale. So it all just triangulates around. There's a lot of opportunity in streaming. One of the things we found in our survey was that there's actually a slightly higher percentage, slightly more than half youth sports operators are experimenting with or shipping internal tools with AI, building internal tools with AI than are using streaming, which is kind of crazy because I think the general view of a youth sports operator is, maybe not the most cutting edge tech person, and yet more of them are building internal tools with AI than are using streaming, which is kind of off the shelf software most operators can find easily.
Yeah, I agree with you on the piece about Facebook and YouTube. Still shocked that so many people use it because we talked about Game Changer, and this report said it. Why these operators are live streaming is because their main goal is to give grandma and grandpa and parents a place to watch the game and everything. So like when you think of Facebook and you think of YouTube and they had in Twitch, I think they had about 86% in this survey of people streaming through there. You think about that and you're like, well, there's no score bug. Half the time the Wi-Fi is pretty laggy. It's not the 1080p that Game Changer has and whatnot. So I'm wondering if it's like, you talk about adoption, you talk about education. I'm just thinking to myself, like, well, it's easy to use Facebook. It's easy to use YouTube. It's convenient. It's free. I'm wondering if there's like kind of this subscription fatigue or this cost thing where people are just like, hey, listen, I already just spent money on registration fees. I spent money on gear. Let me just fire up Facebook or let me just fire up YouTube. And I might not want, a Game Changer subscription or a TeamSnap subscription. What do you think that has legs?
I think where I noticed the difference between the Replayer native frame study and the ones we've done, particularly this latest operator study, we were speaking specifically to operators, right? So people at the team, club, and facility level. YouTube was 7% of the responses, Facebook was 5%, HUDL was 6%, Game Changer was 12%, right? So YouTube and Facebook were still among the 4 streaming platforms that got named, but it was a smaller percentage than what Replayer found, which was something like 75% said they use YouTube, 60% use Facebook, and 31% use Twitch, right? You got to remember their survey was of parents. So I think there is this big delta between parents who aren't in the space and just assume, yeah, I could stream this on YouTube, that's good enough, and youth sports operators who are obviously more likely to be aware of their options. The HUDLs, the baller TVs, Game Changer, obviously. So I think that explains the difference, which tells me, A, huge adoption opportunity, plenty of green space, especially among parents, but also it's about parent education. And I suspect this is why Game Changer last year rolled out their program where they would outfit recreation fields across America in partnership with Pixelot with free fixed cam installs. And below that would have a QR code. Parents can go up and scan, and then boom, I think you got to pay your $9.99 a month to watch the video. Pixelot is positioning themselves as AI cameras as a service, right? They don't want to be the consumer brand. They want to partner with tech platforms like Game Changer, get the cameras installed where they can, and then that serves as advertising to parents because they show up at the field, they see the camera, they see the QR code, but now they have to pay to watch it. So I think the way to reach parents here, again, it's through the distribution, which is why I like what TeamSnap and Xbox One or Xbox Go are also doing, is because, it's going to be hard for any of these camera companies or individual streamers to do the mass consumer marketing. But it is easier to partner with tech platforms, partner with large operators, install cameras, and then at the point of the game, that's when you can capture the parent. So I think there's this, you want the clubs using your stuff, and then you can use those clubs and facilities and venues to compel the parents, to sign up for your for your SaaS platform, basically. I think that's the play, and it seems to be where the industry's going. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? You get one partner, and that partner can show your product to 1,000 people. Much better form of marketing there.
Are we cooling on streaming sponsorship a little bit? Are we cooling on how much that could make for a league, or subsidize the costs? What are you thinking?
No, I know the conversation and the LinkedIn post and what we talked about earlier. I think it's a great business opportunity. If you are the rights holder, if you are Perfect Game, let's use them as the example, 339,000 concurrents, right? That is a great business to be in. That is they own the IP, they're selling ads, they're making money. Great business opportunity. Great for the advertiser because there's outsized ROI. But depending on the platform or the event or the club, that money isn't always passed back to the athlete. By the way, I'm not assigning any moralizing here, right? It's just the way it is. It's a good business. That's fine. It's in the terms and conditions. However, when we talk about streaming and sponsorship subsidizing participation, well, does any of this money go back to the clubs? I know Team Snap came out about 6 months ago and said they passed back $20 million to clubs in the aggregate. They crossed that threshold. Well, that's over the course of years, and how many clubs, right? So how much to any given club or league? Probably not a lot, right? So where it becomes a conversation is if you're thinking about sponsorship, like replayers positioning their cameras, which have a annual subscription of $1,000, and I know it's subsidized, and they're passing back 40% of the streaming revenue to the club. But when you do the math on it, any given club has 12 to 15 families in it, right? How much advertising dollars are those 12 to 15 families worth, right? The answer is over the course of a season. The answer is like a couple $100, right? In total, maybe if you sell all the inventory, so when you chop that up amongst 10 families, you're not talking about like tons of money here subsidizing participation. And I would argue that it's probably less. It's probably like if I'm a family and I see your ad on a stream 20 times over the course of 3 months, that's worth like $5 in brand spend, right? So you're subsidizing my cost by $5. So the point is you need higher. It's not that we're cooling on streaming sponsorship as a business opportunity. It's great, especially for these larger events where they own the IP and they could sell ads against it. But I would just be careful about tech platforms or camera companies saying, hey, this is going to solve pay to play. Because to solve pay to play, you need to generate hundreds, if not thousands of dollars per family. Let's call it even hundreds based on streaming ads. Well, I don't think you could show any family enough ads for a sponsor, a brand to say, yes, I'm going to spend hundreds of dollars per household. Like that is just not how media math works. You usually spend hundreds of dollars to reach 10,000 families, not one family. So that's where that disconnect happens. Does that make sense? Like it's a convoluted thing to talk through.
I know, and I'm trying to have a rebuttal, and I'm just trying to continue the conversation because it's an interesting conversation. Is it just, I know we reference them all the time, but you're exactly right. Like PG is the gold standard, 330,000 concurrents, 1 billion impressions, all the stuff that Rob Pondra always talks about and stuff. I mean, Dick's Sporting Goods is going to integrate it into their stream next week at the All-American Classic. Well, that's going to have a massive audience because 10 to 15 of those guys are going to be drafted in 2027. So are you saying that a lot of these blue chip brands that we always talk about that want to come into streaming, are they going to look at, we need this audience. We need a showcase that is going to have 300,000 concurrents, or we need an audience of high net worth individuals that are going to tune into the All-American Classic. And just to expand on that a little bit, I really like where Dick's Sporting Goods and Unrivaled are kind of going. Like does Game Changer, we saw them with Rocker Bee Ranch. They were the ones you were talking about with the distribution play where they had the QR code. Is Game Changer Dick's, are they gonna target these big tournament venues in the future? Because you know what? Hey, we might have fragmented leagues in Walla Walla, Washington, that might not be, a space that we want. But hey, here's thousands of teams coming through Rocker Bee. Here's thousands of teams coming through Cooperstown next year. Is that something that you think they can roll up and maybe sell to a blue chip brand and that provides the ROI they're looking for?
Yes, and that's happening today, right? That's what Base Sports Group, Priority Partnerships, and PG already do. And I said this in the piece, the advertising today is largely at the events because you do have thousands of families coming in, and a brand like Dick's or whomever else can spend with one person and reach thousands of families and do on-site activations. That is a great business. Where the opportunity exists, though, is in the long tail of these leagues. When you add in the tech platforms or consolidation, right? Where you have somebody who owns 40 clubs, or a tech platform like TeamSnap or League Apps or Game Changer that sits across tens of thousands of teams and clubs and leagues, and millions of parents use the app. Now what you are doing is you are consolidating all of those impressions through one platform, right? Let's use the example of TeamSnap, right? Just to be simple. They have lots of rec leagues. State Farm, our avatar for a sponsor, can work with TeamSnap to reach those thousands of leagues, millions of families, right? That is a great business for TeamSnap. That is great for State Farm. And in the aggregate, that does pass, as we've seen, $20 million back to those tens of thousands of clubs. But when you do the math, and that's over the course of years. So in any given year, to any one of those tens of thousands of clubs, how much money are we really talking? The answer is, in reality, today, not a lot. And this all goes back to just understanding media math. And again, here's a media guy hat, right? But we've talked about youth sports as a media company. This is what when you talk about sponsorship, it's media, right? The same economics that work on TV and newspapers and websites is what is now being applied to youth sports. It's all about just impressions. And the way media and sponsorship generally is sold and priced is on something called CPM, cost per mil, mil standing for 1,000, right? Depending on your vertical and topic, that can be anywhere from 50 cents to reach 1,000 people with something like really low level and baseline. A sports blog, for example, may get $1 CPM. Every 1,000 people, Budweiser will spend $1 to get 1,000 impressions. Not super valuable. On the other end, you have B2B sponsorship, which is our newsletter. We have 20,000 people in our audience, right? That is 20,000, right? We charge, I'd have to do the effective math. We don't even price it on CPM because B2B sponsorship is like off the reservation. We probably charge like a $500 effective CPM to reach our audience, $250 to $500, because you're reaching decision makers who, if they buy your product, may buy a $10,000 service. So brands are willing to spend more in B2B. And then there's a huge spectrum in the middle. I would guess that an advertiser to reach youth sports families in a fairly targeted manner, maybe the CPM, just choose a round number, is $10, right? That means you're spending for digital impressions $10 per 1,000 people, per 1,000 parents you reach, right? Well, and maybe you can reach those parents 100 times over, right? But when you do that math, how many dollars does any parent get from $1,000 from $10 divided by 1,000 families times 100, right? The answer is, I don't know, you can do the math, but like you're talking dollars, tens of dollars. That's my point, is that with just digital impressions or more simplistic things like ads on the back of a jersey or banners in the outfield, the amount of money going to 1,000 impressions is relatively small, and then it's divided by 1,000. That's not enough to subsidize participation. So you need really high impact sponsorship, a la naming rights, to begin to have it so that the per impression amount is enough for any parent to actually influence the cost any parent is paying, right? For
Gotcha.
a team to make, if my local club makes $2,000 a year in sponsorship and we only have 10 parents on that team, right now that 2,000 is divided by 10, and that's $200 per family, lowering their costs in theory to participate. So that's kind of the point here.
Let's move on to a little bit a different part of the report. The cost part of the report was interesting. The study also dug into youth sports costs and found something we've argued about a lot on this podcast and on LinkedIn, and that is the upper echelon of spending is both dragging up the median cost and fueling narratives and perceptions. 53% of families spend under $1,000 per child per year, according to the study, and 76% are at $2,500 or under for a year. But there was a premium tail when they did survey a lot of these parents, and like we said in the beginning, the majority of these surveys were parents. There was roughly 10% of families spending over $5,000 and nearly 5% exceeding $10,000. Interesting, because like this is a report from a brand. This isn't a report from like a brand or a league, that offers premium tournament experiences, or it's a private league hoping to, tamper down numbers. We've talked about it multiple times on this podcast. This is from a point of capture streamer and an infrastructure partner, and both benefit long term from more parents and who pay, and sports, and more kids that play. And even on LinkedIn, social media, like, so one of the companies is running an entire marketing campaign around ending pay to play. So the lack of eye popping numbers I thought was really interesting. The data doesn't necessarily benefit the messaging there. So just next time you're reading a Wall Street Journal or a Times report, and some bartenders spending $10,000-$15,000 on their kids' sports, just know that it's a significant outlier.
Yeah, we've talked about this. It's smart of anyone who does a survey, because you get the brand recognition, you get the links, right? It's good branding, right? And in this case, they had 339 parents in the survey, so you might as well ask about cost. I think it's just another data point to what we've talked about, we wrote about with the Project Play report months ago. These are average numbers. That $1,000 per family per primary sport is an average. It's not the median. Those are very different things. That average is yanked upwards by Striker Pence and his family that spends $100,000 per year. It's dragged up by the 10% of athletes who spend thousands, $5,000+ a year to travel on these elite circuits, right? 9 out of 10 kids aren't at that level, but the average is dragged up. So just another data point to prove that. And again, from what we see and from this data, it's the travel and its intensity, right? In our club survey report, the per attendance cost for any of these things for most clubs was between like $15 and $20. So if you think about that from a childcare perspective, right? And I get some of these kids are well outside of childcare years, but from an activity perspective, you go somewhere for 90 minutes and pay $20 for your kid to be entertained for 90 minutes, right? That is a pretty reasonable cost, but it's the volume. What we saw is that the average club is, and this isn't news to anybody in our audience, the average club is 9 months a year, 4 days a week. When you do the math on that and the math of the average club participation, it comes out to somewhere around $20 per instance. So it's not the sheer participation cost, it's the intensity of participation with clubs that drive up the cost. And then a lot of that cost comes from the fact that the travel costs are baked into that, or in some cases, in addition to that. The tournaments and then the hotel. So that's, again, that's a separate conversation. But those costs are borne by the higher end families. So there's this weird paradox, the conversation about how do you increase access at the lower end? It's $1,000 per family. Well, the answer is, well, no, it's not. It's actually the more well-to-do families that are spending probably way more than they should. You can still participate and play in rec leagues for a lot less than that. So those numbers become misleading when it just makes it seem like, every family needs to pay $1,000 per season to play a sport. That is not the case.
Let's keep the talk around streamers going. HUDL has introduced for the first time a Backed by HUDL campaign where they're taking one soccer club over in England and outfitting it with their entire tech, from cameras to GPS trackers, video tagging, and expert level coaching. Seems like they want to do kind of a test case for what happens when you give a soccer club that has absolutely nothing and outfit it with everything, state-of-the-art technology and everything. So they're now going to see what effect HUDL products have on player development, their standing in the league, and more. I love this marketing campaign. I think it's a solid idea. I would hope they go a little bit further and they build kind of a media layer around it, on top of this, and produce some content tracking the club's progress in their entire season. But good on the boys over there at HUDL.
Yeah, I think this is similar to the Pottstown Scout team, right? This is about youth sports as content, right? Is it Dick's or Game Changer has a scout team as well, right? And others do Game Changer, right? So this is about, hey, we're going to find the team. We're going to give them all of our stuff. I guarantee you they're going to film it and produce content or ads or clips out of it. And it's great marketing. So this is an easy playbook for, I think, anyone in youth sports, is to go and you're effectively sponsoring a team, right? Like you're effectively buying naming rights. What are we talking about? Higher impact sponsorships. It's not just that on the stream. It's not just a jersey. You're giving them everything, right? You are the team. That is the HUDL team. That is the Game Changer Scout team. Now, the tricky part is you can't do this with every team in America because it's all those teams who buy your product, right? So you have to selectively choose a team, own that team, and then use that ownership of that team for your own, kind of content and promotion. And there are two totally different businesses here, by the way. You have teams that are endemic to youth sports, or businesses that are endemic, like HUDL, like Game Changer. So they want to pick a team, show off what their stuff can do, and then show that to the other 99% of teams out there to sell it to. And then on the other side, you have brands that are not endemic to youth sports. There's nothing State Farm can give a team to generate content from. Hey, we gave all the kids on this baseball team insurance. Watch our videos, right? Like, it doesn't work that way, right? So they can sponsor the long tail of teams, and the endemic teams can choose a single club to give them everything they have to show off all their wares, just like Nike does with pro basketball players, right? Or college basketball teams. We outfit the whole team in Nikes. Nobody pays for that. All the people downstream of that are the ones who watch it and pay for it. Same thing.
Good luck to HUDL FC this season. Last one, the Patriot Games.
Are they named? Is it a name?
I don't know if it's going to be called HUDL FC. They did the campaign. The people in the campaign named themselves HUDL FC. I don't know if that's going to be like, hey, we also get your naming rights. So we'll have to keep track of this promotion of this campaign. Nominations are open too. If you're from England or you got friends in England, nominations are open right now. So
that's way cooler than like Leeds 8U FC, right?
HUDL FC.
HUDL FC. Cool. Who wouldn't like that?
That's a pretty cool name. The Patriot Games are actually happening, as we alluded to earlier in the episode. Athletes are scheduled to start arriving in Ohio today. The competition kicks off on Sunday at SPIRE, who we talked about earlier, and runs through Tuesday. Over 100 high school-aged athletes representing the 50 states, territories, and tribal nations will compete with boys and girls champions, splitting a $250,000 scholarship award. Here are the list of events: dodgeball, kickball, tug of war, victory hoops, presidential qualifier, varsity circuit, Operation Endurance, which sounds like a military activation. If you're wondering what some of these are, you're not alone. There was a 16-year-old that was quoted representing Florida to the Washington Times saying, "I'm not 100% sure what's going to be happening." And apparently the only thing competitors were told was there will be a 100-meter dash, according to the report. So the Patriot Games are happening. How are they happening? We don't know. What are some of the events? We don't really understand them. But I'm kind of excited to see how this plays out. I mean, a little bit of Hunger Games and youth sports without the murder and assault and stuff. So I'm actually really excited to see this. I think it streams Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern, or you can catch it on the ESPN app all weekend long.
Yeah. I don't think there's going to be any and then they're showing some on ABC, but it's going to be on tape delay.
Yes, that's the Thursday at 9 p.m.
What I think, listen, the enhanced games seem to be an unmitigated failure, right? I got like 2 viral clips, and the bottom line of the enhanced games was that the actual Olympians who weren't enhanced still put up better numbers, right?
A lot of PRs, a lot of personal records.
I don't think it was a commercial success. TKO put on UFC put on an event at the White House. That obviously had a lot of attention, and it's became politicized, as will the Patriot Games. I'll get to that in a sec. They lost money on that. TK announced their earnings, and they sort of copped it, like, we're not going to do this again. We lost money, right? And then the Patriot Games are obviously an administration, White House administration driven thing. It's too politicized, right? Without casting any assignment here in either direction. The reality is, half the country, anything Trump does, half the country is going to hate. Right? It's just the reality of the situation. So because the Patriot Games and the UFC thing were tied into Trump, you have instantly lost. It's the Michael Jordan quote, Republicans buy sneakers too, right? It's come to life, right? You're now putting on sporting events that have a tie to 50% of people and appall the other 50% of people. So just from that standpoint alone, you've automatically disqualified half the country that would care about this or embrace it, and they're going to want to dump on it every chance they get. Never mind that it's coming together at the last minute. So good on SPIRE for getting it. I think it's great for SPIRE. It's great for Venture HR, or is it Venture HR? Venture HR
with an S.
Venture with an S HR, right? We'll all know it after this, right? Or the 28 people who watch it on ABC in the stream will know it, right? So I don't know. It's a cool event. Interesting idea. I generally am, I don't say out, but I'm not super bullish on most of these like fringe upstart sports leagues, competitions, and ideas. The thing that makes sports great and why attention aggregates to the very slim percentage of pro sports is because so much, we saw this during the pandemic when there were no people in the stands. So much of sports viewership and fandom is about allegiance, right? It's about tribalism, where you grew up in England, which city you grew up in the US, which country you root for in the World Cup. It's about the pageantry. It's about 100,000 fans at a college football game. And it's not just about the competition. Yes, something might be really fun to watch, right? On a one-off, that TGL Golf League might be really fun to watch. There might be a really cool race that would be great here. But that 100-meter dash they're going to do in the Patriot Games is just way less interesting to anything they're going to do in the Olympics. And it has not just to do with the quality caliber of the athlete. It has to do with the history and pageantry of it all. It's why the Little League World Series, right, is way more interesting to view than the Ripken Nationals, because it's an established thing that people have built up years caring about. It's something you watch every August, things like that. So I'm just generally out on like many of these upstart things. It's why I don't think flag is ever truly going to catch on, pro flag, as like a mainstream viewership thing, right? You might get enough fans to make money, but like you're never going to rival the NFL. You know, the fandom in the NFL goes back centuries. Right? I think you see people, a million people watch the girls flag finals. It's on a Sunday afternoon when nothing else is on. It is the championship. We love championship events in America, but you're just, you know, you see this with the NBA, like the WNBA, the ratings are good, but it's a slog to build a league that people care about night in and night out.
Yeah, and what we talked about with the NFL flag, how ESPN put their entire weight behind it, putting this on their app that I don't even know what the numbers are, but it's just strictly on an app where you got to go stream. I think that tells you everything you need to know about how ESPN respects the Patriot Games and stuff. And I think it's a cool concept. I'm interested to see the production. I could see a lot more viral moments than what we talked about with the enhanced games earlier. You know, maybe Florida, maybe Pennsylvania, you know, one of the Barstool guys get behind Chicago or something like that, like the competitor from Chicago. I can see that kind of coming to fruition. I mean, guys, you know, we're very parochial, very patriarchal about like where we went to high school or where we go down the shore and everything. So I can see that kind of coming into play and stuff. But this is just going to be a watered down version at prime time on ABC Thursday, 9 p.m. because they don't want to do another NCIS or Bachelor rerun or something like that and everything. 9 p.m. is not really the greatest time to really put this out for if you're really trying to, you know, maximize your opportunities. So I'm interested in the production. I'm interested to see, you know, some of the viral clips that come out of it and stuff. But you know what? Great for Spire. Great for Venture HR.
No, it's a great get. It's a great get. It's just, yeah, I think you're just going to keep seeing interest in sports accrue to the creme de la creme, right? It's why NFL tickets, it's why FIFA sold $2 billion in hospitality sales, right? It's why, you know, you're not going to build Ken Griffin from Citadel. I think he owns a place in Stone Harbor, which is down the coast from where I'm at in Jersey right now. And he said, hey, it's a great bet. It's cheaper than the Hamptons. And they're not building more of that land, right? Very simple investment thesis. Stone Harbor is very expensive. Like the average price is like $2-3 million for people who don't know in New Jersey. But he's like, they're not building more of that land. In sports, they're not building more Super Bowls, right? They're not building more World Series or US Opens or World Cups. They're not building more Dallas Cowboys. So like, I continue to think you'll see ticket prices and attention increase to the most premium sports products. And everyone else is trying to turn a participation type sporting event a la flag into a pro league that people are going to frequently watch and have the same allegiance. Look at the WNBA and MLS, which are now finally having some commercial success. How many decades did it take to take things we know very well, basketball, just with women, under the logo of the NBA, and then a meaningful professional soccer league in the United States? It's taken decades for those things to reach some level of respectability in terms of viewership. It'd be a lot harder for like fringe sports, like, you know, flag.
Pickleball is a great example.
Pickleball's the best example. It's not watchable.
It's not watchable.
It's not watchable because
love playing it, not watchable.
That's it. Just because you love playing something doesn't mean you want to watch it, right? You didn't grow up, and nobody grew up having a pickleball rooting interest. When you were 3 years old, your dad didn't show you a pickleball match and take you to a game to meet Johns or whatever the hell that guy's name is, right? When you were 3, you didn't get a signed pickleball from John, right? Like those things matter. It's why people pay for sports and watch it. It's not just about the competition. It's part of your identity.
Live Golf, another great example. You know,
Live Golf.
they're playing the same thing. They're playing the same sport. They got the same, you know, some of the best former PGA Tour pros and stuff. But, you know, I like watching the guys at the Masters, or I like watching the guys at the Zurich Classic over watching the Bleakers or the Gleekers or whatever the heck their names are and stuff, you know, playing 3 rounds in some crazy Australian country and pageantry and stuff. I know it's for some people, but obviously it's not for everybody if the PIF just pulled out.
There you go. I went to the PGA Championship. I saw Koepka and DeChambeau up close. I think Koepka's back now, right? But DeChambeau is still in Live, right? I was so excited to see them. Wow. You know, and then like the next weekend, I couldn't even tell you how to find find DeChambeau golfing on Live. Couldn't even tell you where it is.
Yeah.
Right. That's it.
So, hey, everybody, have a great weekend. We appreciate you tuning in, and we will talk to you next week. GG's.
Okay.